welcome to the Use of Pens podcast. I'm your host, Tristen. I have my parents here.
Hey.
Hi.
And today we're going to be talking about building a support system. So we're talking about like what that was like for Trent when he was little, what's it like now, maybe give some tips on how you can help your support system or form a support system if you are in need of that, and get a lot of personal experience from the parents here. So let's get started. I think I would like to hear almost like a comparison of what you would say your support system was like when he was little versus now. Is it easier to get more people now? Was it easier when he was younger because he was so cute and not a man? Explain.
He was so cute, but he was so hard.
Yeah.
Oh, man. Very hard.
Very hard.
When he was little.
Yeah.
Explain.
So okay, I'll explain it this way with a little anecdote.
Great.
For me as a dad and his parent, I always had this little joke because, he was in a lot of different classrooms, like school classrooms in his younger years before he transferred to Heartspring. And I think, we were very appreciative of those teachers and educators who worked with him and stuff. But like every time we were going to go into a new program and he was going to go into a new classroom, that teacher would come in and have this conversation. They were trying to put us at ease, so they would say things like, well, I've never had a child I couldn't handle, or, like all these positive things, like we deal with this all the time. Like we can handle this. And at some point then in the future, there's a story about that teacher being out in the hallway crying or whatever because Trent had thrown a fit and they didn't know what to do with him. And then, it wouldn't be too long before he'd be on to the next program to try. So, people who are trained, to deal with that, it was a lot. It was a lot. So,
when he was little, it seemed like the people who helped us during certain times in our lives were people who had worked with him at school and were really good with him and felt like they could handle it. And there were two people I can think of who were kind of from the school, Rhonda and Jeanette, Janelle. And they did help us out a little bit at home, but there was a time that people, a couple of times people came to me and said, I really, really love Trent, but I can't do it. And I totally respected them for that. Yeah. And so, but when he was little, support system was mainly my parents, except for when Trent was at his worst. Like if he was going through a really difficult time, we didn't do that. But a couple people who worked with him in the school, and then a couple of friends. I mean, Susan wasn't afraid to work with him.
Yeah.
And
basically, you had to be willing to be a punching bag at some point if you were going to watch him, because there was just a very high likelihood that at some point, while he was in your care with you, he was going to get agitated and he was going to come after you. And so we're very thankful that there were people who were willing to take that risk, because even at a very young age, he was incredibly strong. We've said before, at like 11, 12 months, he was carrying a full gallon of milk around the house. If you were in a restraint with him and he was really going crazy, if you were holding his arm, like I would hold him and keep his arms because he would pinch or hit, and then he figured out a way, like he could kick his shoes off, and even in his socks, he could get hit like his big toe and his next toe, and he could pinch you with his toes, and I'll just tell you, it hurt. And so you had to like this was serious. You look at Trent now, and he just just seemed like this really lovey,
Mm-hmm.
cuddly guy. But he could put the smackdown on you.
But
Pretty hard.
I think not just aren't afraid to go under attack like that, but also to be confident. Because if
Yeah.
he thought you were scared,
Yeah.
that was not good.
Yeah.
So they had to be sincerely okay with it. And that was hard to come by. And there were times where there was nobody who
Yeah.
could do that. But I felt like we always had the emotional support.
Yeah.
We had friends from church.
Mhm.
I mean, I would just say though, just a couple of friends from church who knew us well enough that they could actually be emotional support to us.
Mm-hmm.
But definitely my parents were that emotional support for us.
And you, like, it's a learning process for everybody. Like, I remember going and having a talk with your mom about, like, she was afraid to set Trent off. And so she would talk really gently and soft and sweet to him. And then that set him off. And we were like, no, you have to be firm and direct with him, when you can't treat him like other people. So there was that little bit, and I think you were alluding to that a second ago. But
I would say, like, comparing then to now, like Tristen asked, the people then were more like friends and people who'd worked with him at school. Now the support system is our kids, our other kids. My parents are still there, still the support. But like Stephanie is just somebody who's been in his life for a very long time and is not afraid to come in and do whatever we need her to do with him.
Well, maybe we should say, like, Stephanie's relationship with him, if you haven't listened to the episode that she was on, she was a para in his very first classroom at Heartspring. So she has known him for 10 years, 12 years.
No, he was 11 when he went to Heartspring.
Yeah, 15 years.
Yeah, so a long time.
Yeah.
So she's been, like, she knew him when he went to Heartspring. He was at about his worst. And not only was he huge, big guy, but, very strong and prone to those outbursts. And so she been through that. So very good to have her.
I think our
and
support,
she loves him. I'll just say that.
Yes.
And she loves him.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think our support group is growing a little bit. Like, our sister-in-law, Christy, has started working for the business, and she's getting to know him better, and she's getting more comfortable to be someone that can just stay with him for a little while if we need it.
Yeah. And don't you think that's a lot of when all you know of Trent is that he can attack you, that he can get angry, that he can bang his head. And when he gets angry and even he's angry towards himself, so he's biting himself, or he's hitting himself, or he's hitting his head against the wall or something, that is terrifying. If you are not used to it or being around it, it is
or
scary.
Even like, I mean, I've grown up with it, and there have been a couple times he has come to bang the crap out of my head, and it's scary.
Yeah.
It is, because it's everything he has in him fighting. I mean, it's not just a little thing.
Yeah.
It's
It is that.
I'm
Well,
gonna hit my head till there's a goose egg in it, or I crack my head open.
he's in that, he's in that fight or flight thing. I get, that's the only way to say it.
Oh,
but,
yeah. Well, yeah, I'm sure that's what it is.
Yeah. But so if that's all you know, then you're worried. And so, we've had people who've kind of been on the outskirts, even family that've been kind of on the sidelines with him, but not really sure what it is that sets him off, afraid of what he might do or whatever. And so, part of that with Christy is just learning to be around him more.
Yeah, well, I was going to say that too. Like, Pam is a friend from church who has been working for the business and thus being around Trent more. And she's come to me several times just to talk about it, because she's like, she said she'll be at the house and he'll be walking around, or he'll come downstairs for a little bit and go back up, or, maybe he'll be upstairs for a while by himself. And Pam's like, should we check on him? Like, is Trent okay?
Yeah.
And she was like, Easton had to tell me, like, this is his house. Like, he's comfortable here.
Yeah.
If he wants something, he'll get it. If he thinks he needs to ask for it, he'll come ask for it. Like, he'll entertain himself until he can't, and then he'll come tell you, like, this is where he's comfortable. And she's like, oh. Like, she's just told me a few times, like, learning more about him makes her more comfortable.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny, people like her who have been around him for most of his life, if you don't see him in a different setting, like at home, you don't know about those things.
Yeah.
Well, don't you think some of that is like, okay, people know that Trent is different, that he has autism, that he doesn't verbalize things and whatever. It's really easy then, if you don't really know him, it's really easy to look at him like he's a disabled person. Like he can't do anything because he can't do some things. And so it's hard to sort through that stuff unless you spend time around him. And that probably is part of this learning process, as we're talking in the episode about having a support system. I think sometimes as parents, we were afraid that he might hurt somebody or hurt their children. And so we didn't want to have to apologize for his behavior to people. And we always felt horrible when he did something. And so the tendency is then to pull back. And so to not give other people the chance to see him or be around him more. And I think in years past, that extended to a whole lot of people. If you had a special needs child, you didn't take them out in the community. Nobody knew. You just kept them at home all the time.
And you think about, like, that wasn't that long ago.
No.
If you really think about it.
Everybody knows Trent is a fantastic artist, but did you know that he has a store full of all kinds of cool stuff featuring his art? Things like short sleeve t-shirts,
long sleeve t-shirts, sweatshirts,
and hoodies, along with coloring books and Trent's illustrated book, Drawn to Be You. Insulated tumblers, 3 different styles.
Insulated wine tumblers, 2 different colors.
And a camper mug in 3 different colors.
With the moose kissing a goose.
During the year, we have special gift boxes. We've got surprise box for birthday or special occasion, and several limited edition coloring books every year.
Drawings by Trent is a business that is providing for Trent's future. The business is also helping Trent's art and message reach people all over the world. So check it out at drawingsbytrent.com. That's drawingsbytrent.com.
And like I've probably said this before, but I had a geography. That's countries, right? Yeah. I had that class in college that I did so well in. And we had there was a Russian teacher, and she came in to talk about Russia to us and how the school was and all of that. And I noticed she didn't mention it was all like, you have to be at this level, you have to be at this level. And once you graduate high school, you have to take this test. And if you pass this level on this test, then you get to go to college. If you don't, then you have to go to these certain jobs. You can't just choose, to do anything. And I remember asking her, what about people who have a disability? What about people who struggle with reading or have autism or whatever? And she was like, oh, we don't have that. I'm like, that's what you think.
Yeah.
That's what you think. Yeah. Because, and I mean, that was only a few years ago.
Wow.
And it's in another country, but it's still happening today, which is crazy.
Yeah. So it can be hard then to find people or, to build a support system when you're afraid that anybody that's around it might get hurt, or that, there might be a different challenge there.
I think making sure there's honest communication with the person is so important. making sure they understand if this is too much for you, you have to let us know.
Yeah.
Because we don't want it to get to the point where they just quit on the spot, or they, you know,
or they ghost
or there's
you.
any or they ghost you, or there's hard feelings or whatever,
Yeah.
you know, because I remember stressing to people, like, we know this is hard.
Mhm.
We know. And if it's not something you're comfortable with, please, you have to tell us.
Yeah.
And that there came a point to that for on a lot of occasions. I know Amanda watched you guys when we would go to church on Wednesday nights or whatever, practice. And she did that for a long time. She was a teenager. And I think she stopped because she got married, went off to college or whatever. But but that was hard for her.
Us.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think you guys, in our situation with you and Trevor being there, that helped a lot with Trent.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And we were only gone for an hour and a half.
Yeah.
And while he was still, he's always been incredibly strong for his age and his size, he still was smaller.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
It was relative to,
Yeah,
you know.
it's
Well, and
different when
also
it's-
we were very close to,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah,
and
we weren't far away.
she could call if we needed to come home right away, you know?
Yeah. And, you know, there were times, I think we've talked about this before, there came a time when our discussion, Andy and I, was, you know, like, okay, we can't leave Trent at home like, I have to be home if Trent is home, because if he gets upset, nobody else is strong enough to hold him. And so we know those challenges, and we know how difficult it can be to let other people into that, because it's not pleasant. It's not pleasant for, you know, it wasn't pleasant for us. At times it wasn't pleasant for other people, but you know, we've learned that if you don't give other people the opportunity to be hurt, like in our case, be physically hurt, then they miss out on a whole lot. You know, I think that sometimes the people who came to us that worked with him in school, like, these are the people that they were seeing him be aggressive. They were on the receiving end of that aggression, and yet so many of them just loved him. And if we would have kept him away, you know, held him back, or didn't give them the opportunity to help us in those times, then they, you know, they're missing out on that. We're missing out on that.
Yeah. I think something important too is that I've noticed a lot of the people we've mentioned are people from church. So that means that you guys weren't just keeping him at home, or like, you know, you're still trying, even though it was like hard. And I know, like, that was the pastor, but you could have kept him at home all the time. Like, you didn't have to go out and do that,
and it was hard at church a lot of the time.
Yeah.
He likes to go, but even now, you know, he loses patience pretty quick if it goes too long. A lot of times he's just done, but he wants to be there.
Yeah.
Easton loses patience when it goes too long as well. Easton has no excuses.
Right. So it does help to be involved with something. That's where, you know, people can see him and get to know him.
Well, and that was always a big part of our lives, being in church, and having that support system and being there. And we know people, we've talked to people who, like, wanted to go to church but felt like their kid was going to be a disruption.
Yeah.
And you just have to deal with it. And, you know, church people are not always known for being the kindest and most loving people, like we should be.
Yeah.
But sometimes that doesn't happen, you know, and when you come in church and there's somebody making noise that is distracting, that can be a problem. And we know people who've been in church and somebody came to them and said, you're too loud, or what, you know, and that all, I think we as parents always take that way more personally than the person who's sharing it wants it to be taken, probably. But we just decided, Andy and I just decided, when you guys were all young, that, like, we had lives and we were going to live them, and Trent was going to go where we went, And if he got upset or had a fit, we'd take him out and we'd figure it out. But we weren't going to hide him away or make our whole world all the time. I mean, it probably felt like our whole world all the time revolved around him.
I mean, when he draws on your kitchen, you don't get in trouble.
Here we go. Now you're going to get more messages about that.
No,
but
I'm over it.
Like we took him places, and if we needed to leave, we left. And if, we needed to make different arrangements, we did. But
part of the thing was, I mean, we didn't have any other choice. We either didn't go or we took him.
Yeah. And we know.
Or one of us went, and we didn't want to do that either.
Yeah.
We both wanted to be at the
we
kids'
didn't want
events
to
and
miss
things
out
like
on
that.
those things and stuff. So,
So,
hey, buddy,
You want to come sit?
did you hear us talking about you?
I think a lot of times when you have an adult person with autism in your family, that you don't have the support of kids like we do. I know a lot of people have their child with autism first, and then they're reluctant to have more children, and or they end up having one, and maybe that one's not interested in being a support person for the family, and that's really sad. But I think it's important for people, as their child becomes an adult, to reach out for services and to talk to people, get an advocate for your child who can help you find the resources you need. Your support system may be the people in your child's day program or the people in your child's residential program. I mean, I know I've heard from some parents who have really violent adult children, and they act like, I'm just going to stay in my home alone with this child and this young adult, and get beat up every day. I have no other choice. Well, they do have another choice. I mean, they need to look at what's available in the community, because there is support out there, but you can't find it sitting alone in your home. And I know a lot of times there's depression and there's things that keep you from reaching out, but I don't think you ever have to be alone in this.
Yeah.
And it's difficult no matter what the situation. I mean, we came from a 2-parent household with other children that were involved. Our other kids didn't shy away from Trent, and it was still very, very difficult. And so we feel for, single parent homes. We get messages from single moms and dads all the time who are struggling, but I think if you are open to what's out there and being open with your child, and I mean, and by that I mean not hiding your kid away, but being open and doing your best to live life with them, then I think those things will come more easily. I think sometimes we close ourselves off and then we don't see them, and then we think there is no help. But there are people who want to help, and it's not always the greatest situation. There's all these things. There's all these reasons why you can't or you shouldn't or you wouldn't want to. But you keep your eyes open, and I think there are options.
And you started to touch on this earlier. When people offer to help, and you are just worried they'll get hurt or whatever, don't discredit their offer. I mean, if they offered to help, well, this could happen, this could happen. What, tell me your concerns or whatever. I mean, there's no reason not to accept help if people are offering and you trust them, except for your own worry about what's going to happen to them from your kid. But if they're willing to take on that responsibility, you sometimes have to swallow your pride and just, say, I can let go of this control for a little bit, because it could be a huge blessing in the long run. You just don't know until you try it.
And maybe you approach it like maybe part of the issue is we feel like, if you have a neurotypical kid and you're going to leave them with a babysitter, there isn't probably a whole lot of instruction and a whole lot of whatever. You just like the babysitter shows up and you go, okay, here you go. And you walk out the door. That can't happen when you have a kid with challenges. And so maybe the approach needs to be more like in a job training situation where you're going to say, okay, if you're willing to do this, I want you to come over and spend some time watching how I interact with my child and learning a little bit. And you don't have to draw it out for months, but a few times of, what's the thing? Watch me while I do it. Let's do it together. And then I'll watch while you do it. And so maybe there's some of that could help ease that transition in. And so your child gets more used to that person. They learn some of the tips and tricks that you have just innately, or learned over time, spending so much time with your kid.
Well, and I think it's a lot easier nowadays because if they have a question, they just call you or they text you, make yourself available.
That's right.
And, cause I mean, even now I'm like, please just, if you have any questions, call me right away. I'll be by my phone.
And how many times have we set out to do something, and maybe even it was a special occasion, and we got all ready and whatever, and we took off, and it was 30 seconds, and we're back at the house.
But I don't know if we're stupid or just won't give up. But I don't know how many times we did that. We just kept doing it
all the time.
We just kept doing it. We kept taking him and having to leave early.
And so you have to, you can't just push your kid off and be like, okay, you're on your own. Like you have to be available. And I think when you are, that builds trust with the person who's watching your kid. And it's not like you're just on your own. And there are times it doesn't work. We had a family member who was going to watch Trent while it had been a really long time. We were going to go out to eat. I think just you and me, and family member was going to watch Trent. And like they were at our house while we were getting ready. And it took a while, got all dolled up, and we get ready to walk out the door, and they're like, yeah, I don't think I can do this. And okay.
So we didn't go.
Now, we weren't happy about it, but it's what you do, So.
Yeah. Okay. Anything else you can think of?
I don't know.
Well, I think, I mentioned adult services and, tapping into that. And just remember that they turn 18, it's their income that gets counted instead of yours now.
Oh, yeah.
So, for them to have an advocate shouldn't cost you anything. It, once you've gone through getting Medicaid established and everything, because a lot of people say, I don't have the money to do any of that. It's, and you just have to go out there and look for those resources because it should not cost you anything when they're adults.
And Trent was on the autism because we didn't know that there was an autism waiver when Trent was diagnosed at 2. And so by the time we learned that, hey, there's this thing. And so we went and applied for it.
He was 8.
It was 8, and it was 14 years.
I remember he was 8 because he was on it for 10 years,
10
and then
years.
he turned 18.
Wait, no, he wasn't on it. He was on the waiting list.
Right, on the waiting
for
list.
It.
That's what I meant.
So he could have had all of these services, and he didn't.
Or maybe not. He might have been on the list for 16 years.
He might have been. I don't know.
Could have been.
But when he turned 18, then that all changes, and there's no longer a waiting period. It's you're it's
eligible.
Different shifts. You're eligible, and so you're covered. I think we just talked to a fan. I think you just talked to a fan who I think their kid was 19 or 20, and they were saying,
19.
we've been waiting for so long. We're like, don't wait. Go to your advocate.
Right. And that's just that she was not given enough information.
Yeah. Yeah, and let's just say there's a huge lack of information. And I don't know what the reason for that. I know for us it was like there was too much of life going on. We didn't have the resource, the bandwidth.
I think a lot of times the people
who
talk to you about those resources assume you know things you don't.
You know, yeah.
That's I think that's a lot.
Because we would have assumed that the doctor would know those things, and no doctor ever told us anything about that stuff.
No.
So we didn't even question it.
I remember when he was diagnosed at 2, the doctor said, you should apply for Medicaid at this time. And we did, and he did qualify, but it was because we were poor.
Yeah.
You know?
Yes, we were.
But he didn't have it for long, and then because we didn't qualify anymore.
Yeah.
So
it was off and on. And, of course, there's tons of paperwork you got to do.
Oh, yeah. And long waits.
Yeah.
But, I mean, it can happen.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. All right. So take advantage of your resources, things that you have access to, even if you don't know. Talk to people.
Yeah.
To figure it out. There's lots of like Facebook groups and all of that. Reach out to mom and dad. Drawings by Trent. If you have particular questions or need a little bit more guidance, I'm sure they'd be happy to help you with that. And yeah, create a support system because that's important for everyone.
Accept help from your friends. Accept it.
Yep.
And your family members.
Mm-hmm.
Do it.
Anything else? Okay.
That's it.
Cool. All right. Thanks for listening to another episode of the Used Up Pens podcast, and we'll catch you next time.
This has been a new episode of Used Up Pens. Thank you so much for listening. New episodes drop every other Wednesday. Make sure to check out our Patreon where we have exclusive merch, exclusive items and Trent drawings, a bunch more content, as well as ad-free episodes, and then also a couple extra podcasts. If you like listening to our podcast, make sure to like and subscribe on YouTube if you're listening on YouTube. And if you're listening on Spotify, make sure to rate and review us, whether that's Spotify or Apple Podcasts, wherever you're listening to podcasts. And then lastly, make sure to check out our store for all of Trent's art and a bunch of other merch that all has Trent's art on it. So thank you so much for supporting the Trent family, the Landreth and Moore family, and see you next time.